Hello and welcome, dear viewers. Today I'll be sharing two dark and shocking stories that seem ripped straight from the scariest of nightmares. These aren't just tales. They're real events that left a mark on the history of criminology. Prepare for a journey into the darkest corners of the human soul. Please support my channel by liking and subscribing, and let's begin. On February 24th, 2019, at approximately 5:40 in the morning, while the world was still asleep, a chilling call was made to the Toyota police station in Aichi Prefecture, Nagoya. The caller reported that acquaintances of theirs might have committed murder. They provided the names of the suspects, 36-year-old Noro Manda and 34-year-old Kabukicho Ishikawa. The caller also disclosed that the two were living together. The police immediately rushed to the given address to investigate the incident. Upon initiating their interrogation, they were met with an unexpected response. The suspects, Manda and Ishikawa, showed no resistance and confessed to the crime without hesitation. They admitted that in early February, they had killed 31-year-old Sachiko Inukai, who had been living with them, and later disposed of her body in a mountain tunnel. The authorities followed the suspects' directions and arrived at the specified location, where they discovered Inukai's severely decomposed body. The sight was horrifying. Manda explained that she had thrown the body into a ravine, which accounted for its position, face down. Despite the winter conditions, the decomposition process was already advanced. The autopsy results revealed that Sachiko Inukai's body bore extensive evidence of brutal violence. The left side of her head showed severe hemorrhaging, her right cerebral hemisphere was heavily damaged, and the brain as a whole exhibited significant inflammation. Subcutaneous hemorrhages were visible on her face, and her neck bore signs of strangulation and skin abrasions. Her entire body was covered in bruises. These injuries indicated the use of extreme physical force. The cause of death was determined to be a traumatic brain contusion caused by a powerful blow to the head. However, Noro Manda and Kabukicho Ishikawa insisted that they had not intended to kill Inukai. Manda admitted to beating her but claimed it was not with the aim of taking her life. According to Manda, during the assault, Inukai lost consciousness and subsequently died. Manda coldly recounted the details of the violence. She had stomped on Inukai, punched her, kicked her in the stomach, and sat on her while delivering more blows. But was this truly an accidental act of violence or a deliberate murder? All three had worked together and shared a residence, adding even more layers of mystery to this disturbing case. At first glance, the three co-workers appeared to share a close and amicable bond. However, those who observed their interactions closely described an unusual and almost servile hierarchy between them. To better understand the events leading up to the crime, it is crucial to analyze the relationship between Noro Manda and Kabukicho Ishikawa, excluding the deceased Sachiko Inukai. The story of their connection began approximately 10 years before the incident. One day, Manda happened to meet a host who invited her to visit his club. This seemingly random encounter became a turning point in her life. Manda was drawn into the world of host clubs. Each time she visited, the host greeted her with warm enthusiasm, loudly acknowledging her presence and creating an illusion of importance. Feeling special, Manda began to dedicate more and more of her time and money to the club. At her most frequent, she visited the club up to 4 times a week. This lifestyle quickly drained her savings. When her money ran out, Manda found herself unable to sever ties with the host. Facing financial struggles, she decided to confide in him about her difficulties, unable to pull herself away from the addictive allure of their interactions. The host suggested that Manda consider working in the adult entertainment industry, assuring her that it would allow her to earn significant money and spend more time with him. These words proved pivotal. Flattered by the host's attention, Manda followed his advice and took a job in the industry. It was there that she met Ishikawa. Ishikawa was a regular client of host clubs, and their shared passion for that environment quickly drew them together. As a couple, they became infamous in the host club scene of Aichi. Their notoriety was so widespread that it was nearly impossible to find someone in that world who hadn't heard of them. They were even referred to as the big shots of the host club circuit, but this reputation carried a distinctly negative undertone. Manda was particularly notorious for her explosive temper. She absolutely would not tolerate a host she favored giving attention to other clients. This behavior earned her the reputation of being a problem client, known for creating tense situations and conflicts. However, the relationship between Manda and Ishikawa went far beyond a typical friendship. One of the hosts revealed that their dynamic resembled a hierarchy, with Manda taking the role of a servant who was completely submissive to Ishikawa. In turn, Ishikawa treated her like a pet, speaking to her dismissively and exploiting her for his own benefit. Moreover, Ishikawa was known for his violent tendencies, and there were multiple instances where witnesses saw him physically abusing Manda. Over time, Ishikawa's acts of violence toward Manda became increasingly frequent. Witnesses observed that Manda appeared completely subservient, carrying out Ishikawa's orders without resistance. However, Ishikawa's cruelty was not limited to Manda. He seemed intent on dominating anyone he perceived as weaker than himself. Ishikawa brought a coworker with intellectual disabilities into their home with the intent of stealing her disability benefits. Manda actively participated in this crime, helping Ishikawa control the victim. However, in September 2018, the coworker managed to escape, leaving Ishikawa and Manda without their primary source of income. With their financial support gone, the pair was forced to search for a new target. It was around this time that Inukai entered their lives. She was a new employee at the same establishment where Manda and Ishikawa worked. Inukai also had an intellectual disability and received disability benefits. To Ishikawa and Manda, she was the perfect target, a defenseless woman who could be easily manipulated. Accustomed to living solely on her benefits, Inukai found herself ensnared by the pair, completely unaware of the devastating consequences her trust and vulnerability would ultimately lead to. After breaking up with her boyfriend and leaving home, Inukai began working in the adult entertainment industry. When Ishikawa learned about her situation, he invited her to move in with him. Thrilled at the prospect, Inukai eagerly agreed. At that time, Manda was not living with Ishikawa but often visited him. To outsiders, the three appeared to get along well, even spending time together at host clubs. However, this apparent harmony began to unravel about a month before Inukai's death. On January 15, 2019, Manda moved in with Ishikawa, and the three started living under the same roof. Tensions quickly escalated, and the atmosphere between them grew increasingly volatile, reaching a breaking point. During a visit to a host club, a conflict erupted. Both Manda and Inukai chose the same host. As previously mentioned, Manda could not tolerate her host giving attention to other clients. She lost her temper and demanded that Inukai change her choice, exclaiming, "Switch your host!" Ishikawa sided with Manda and insisted that Inukai comply. However, Inukai refused to back down. This led to a heated argument. Manda began berating Inukai, shouting at her in a fit of rage. "We're just trying to get along, and you're acting so arrogant!" Manda screamed, her voice filled with anger. Inukai calmly replied, "I didn't ask you to get along with me." Her defiance only fueled Manda and Ishikawa's fury. They perceived Inukai's behavior as insolent and began physically assaulting her. From that day on, the violence became a regular occurrence, relentless and unyielding. A few days later, Manda and Ishikawa returned to the host club without Inukai. One of the hosts asked, "Where is Miss Inukai?" They nonchalantly replied, "She wasn't making enough money for us, so we beat her." Instead of concealing their abuse, they spoke about it with pride, as though it were some twisted accomplishment. Ishikawa, who relished wielding power over others and sought to dominate them, found a new target in Inukai. Manda, who always obeyed Ishikawa without question, followed her lead, and Inukai found herself in the role of a victim. By late January 2019, the violence had escalated to its peak. They bound Inukai's hands and feet with wire to immobilize her and forced her out onto the balcony. There, they took turns watching her to ensure she didn't do anything they deemed unnecessary. Ishikawa was particularly cruel. Before leaving the house, she meticulously instructed Manda to keep a close eye on Inukai, leaving no room for leniency. When Ishikawa left the house, she gave Manda strict instructions to ensure that nothing happened to Inukai. This was likely driven by their fear of losing her disability benefits, which were a critical source of income for them. However, whenever Inukai attempted to resist or pleaded with them to let her go, saying, "I want to escape, please leave me alone," Her pleas were met with brutal beatings. These days became an unending nightmare for Inukai. On February 2nd, Manda delivered a powerful knee strike to Inukai's face. That blow was the final one. Inukai could no longer endure the relentless abuse and succumbed to her injuries. Realizing that Inukai was dead, Manda and Ishikawa decided to dispose of the body to cover up their crime. They drove to a mountainous area about 60 kilometers from their home and abandoned the body there. On February 15th, they withdrew 130,000 yen from Inukai's bank account, which had recently received her disability payment. They spent the money without a hint of remorse. When their crime was uncovered, both admitted to what had happened but denied responsibility for intentional murder. Ishikawa claimed that she had never physically harmed Inukai and insisted she had only assisted in disposing of the body. Moreover, she stated that she didn't even consider such actions to be a crime. Manda admitted to the beatings but claimed she had never imagined they would lead to Inukai's death. Surprisingly, this explanation was sufficient for the court. Instead of being charged with murder, both were indicted on lesser charges, inflicting bodily harm resulting in death, theft, and concealment of a body. The court concluded that their actions to claim Inukai's disability benefits indicated a lack of intent to kill. On July 13, 2020, during the trial, the prosecution requested 12 years of imprisonment for Ishikawa and 8 years for Manda. However, the final verdict was shocking. The court acquitted both on the charge of causing death due to insufficient evidence directly linking the beatings to Inukai's death. Furthermore, the leniency of the sentences was influenced by the fact that neither Manda nor Ishikawa had any prior criminal records. In the end, Ishikawa was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months of imprisonment, followed by 4 years of supervised release, while Manda received a 2-year suspended sentence with a 4-year probation period. When the details of the case and the sentencing became public, it sparked widespread outrage. The internet erupted with negative reactions, condemning the verdict as unjust and far too lenient. However, like many other cases, this one gradually began to fade from public memory, despite the intense criticism it initially received. Over time, the case of Inukai's death faded from public attention. However, 3 years later, in April 2022, it resurfaced in a shocking twist. On April 4th, in a field in Aichi Prefecture, the partially cemented remains of a woman were discovered. Investigators identified the body as Noro Manda, one of the perpetrators in the case from 3 years prior. The grim irony was undeniable. A person who had once committed murder and received a suspended sentence had now become the victim of another heinous crime. This shocking revelation immediately captured public attention, sparking intense discussions. The investigation revealed that 37-year-old Yukari Amaike and 54-year-old Kachimi Yamashita were involved in Manda's murder. However, astonishingly, their initial arrests were not related to Manda's death. They were charged with the abduction, assault, and rape of another woman named Aishi. During an interrogation, Amaike made an unexpected confession. "By the way, we killed a woman and buried her in a field." This admission became the pivotal moment that led to the discovery of Manda's murder. Amaike informed the police that the victim was Noro Manda and provided the precise location where the body was buried. At the site, investigators uncovered Manda's remains. The body was naked, with a black mask covering the face, and was buried beneath a 50-centimeter layer of soil and cement. According to forensic experts, the cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation due to strangulation. Amaike, who also suffered from intellectual disabilities, had led a difficult life. She earned a living through work in the adult entertainment industry, or through so-called companion services, paid social encounters. She had no permanent residence and frequently moved between the homes of her partners. Amaike's criminal history began back in 2010, when she encountered an elderly man who, according to her, made unwanted advances toward her. In retaliation, Amaike threw a knife at him, causing injuries. During the trial, she shocked the court with her outburst, declaring angrily, "I should have just killed him." Her behavior left everyone stunned, and she was sentenced to 4 years and 6 months in prison. After her release, Amaike appeared to make an effort to turn her life around. She got married and tried to lead a stable life. However, her old patterns resurfaced. She resumed her work in paid social encounters, which eventually led to her divorce just a year into the marriage. Following the divorce, her life descended back into chaos, marked by homelessness and a lack of stability. Under such circumstances, Ameke met Katsumi Yamashita. In January 2022, they crossed paths through a paid encounter in Nagoya. The two quickly found common ground and began living together. Like Amaike, Yamashita had no fixed residence and lived out of his car. Amaike moved into his vehicle as well, continuing to earn money through paid social encounters. The victim, known as Aishi, was a colleague of Amaike's in this line of work and a client of Yamashita. However, Aishi didn't become their target by chance. The reason was directly tied to Noro Manda. What connection existed between Manda and this pair? After the case involving Inukai's murder, Manda returned to live with her elderly father. It was during this period that she met Amaike. Tensions quickly escalated between the two women, fueled by significant conflicts. One issue involved a man with whom both had connections, creating a strained love triangle. Another incident occurred when a client introduced to Amaike by Manda failed to pay for services and disappeared. These events severely worsened their relationship. Eventually, Amaike demanded compensation from Manda, amounting to approximately 670,000 won, as reparation for emotional distress. However, Manda, struggling financially, was unable to pay the requested amount. Manda tried desperately to gather the money, borrowing from acquaintances and seeking help, but her efforts were unsuccessful. As time passed, the debt remained unpaid, and Amaike's anger toward Manda only deepened. At some point, Amaike decided to take things further and began gathering information about Manda, likely intending to use it for blackmail. To obtain this information, Amaike lured a woman, referred to as A, into her car, where she held her captive. Amaike demanded that A disclose everything she knew about Manda. However, A, who had no connection to Manda, insisted that she knew nothing. Amaike, convinced that A was lying, became violent. She pulled A's hair, threatened her with a knife, and screamed that she would kill her. At that point, Amaike's boyfriend, Yamashita, joined in the assault. Together, they held A in the car for an extended period, subjecting her to physical abuse and sexual violence. Fortunately, A managed to escape when the pair became distracted. Once free, she immediately went to the police and reported the incident. On April 3rd, during a police investigation into the assault on A, Amaike and Yamashita were apprehended. During the interrogation, Amaike made a shocking confession. She admitted to murdering Noro Manda. She then detailed how it had happened. On March 12th, enraged by Manda's continued failure to repay her debt, Amaike went to Manda's home. When confronted about the money, Manda stated that she didn't have it. In response, Amaike proposed, "Fine, let's go together and find someone who can lend it to you." She forced Manda into her car. From that moment, a horrifying ordeal began. For 3 days, Manda was brutally beaten in the car by Amaike and Yamashita. They repeatedly assaulted her, just as they had done to A before. Despite Manda's desperate attempts to find a way out of the situation, she was unable to secure even a small loan to satisfy her captors. When it became clear that holding Manda any longer was futile, as no money would come from her, Amaike and Yamashita developed a new fear. If they let her go, Manda would almost certainly go to the police. This led them to make a horrifying decision. They resolved to kill her. On March 15th, before the murder, Amaike and Yamashita offered Manda what they chillingly called her last meal, treating her to salmon-filled onigiri. Afterward, Amaike placed a plastic bag over Manda's head, secured it with tape, and waited for her to suffocate. When death didn't come as quickly as expected, Yamashita used an electrical cord to strangle her. After the murder, they hurriedly disposed of the body. They buried it in a field and covered it with cement. To eliminate evidence, they discarded the electrical cord used in the strangulation and Manda's clothing into the sea. On February 29, 2024, the trial of Amaike began. She admitted to all charges, including the murder of Manda and the abduction, confinement, and assault of A. However, regarding Manda's murder, she denied any premeditation, claiming that her initial intent was simply to recover the debt. Amaike alleged that it was Yamashita who suggested the murder and that she was unable to stop him. The prosecution sought an 18-year prison sentence, emphasizing her central role in the crime and the brutality of her actions. The defense argued for a lighter sentence of 4 years, citing her dependency on Yamashita and lack of intent to kill. The court delivered its verdict. As for Ishikawa, no news about her has surfaced since the conclusion of her case. One can only hope that, wherever she is, she bears the weight of her actions, even if not through formal punishment. Many view Manda's death as a consequence of the unjust death of Inukai, a form of poetic justice. This sentiment is particularly shared by those who believe the sentences handed down to Manda and Ishikawa were profoundly unfair. All that remains is the hope that the injustice suffered by Inukai has been, in some small way, atoned for, and that such egregious judicial outcomes will never be repeated in the future. Stay tuned. The second story is coming up, and it will make you think even more. What are your thoughts on the first story? Let me know in the comments. I'm really curious to hear your opinion. Shinjuku Kabukicho, the largest entertainment district in Tokyo, is a place that seems to exist only in dramas and films, a street awash with vibrant neon signs. As a bustling area, it sees a constant flow of people coming and going every day. And yet, it is rife with whispers and troubles. Various incidents and unfortunate events frequently occur, spurred on by the crowds of intoxicated patrons spilling out from the numerous bars. Among these, today's incident has cemented Kabukicho's reputation as a particularly perilous locale among the Japanese. Even decades later, the full story remains obscured, shrouding it in enduring mystery. The year was 1981, nearly 40 years ago, and Kabukicho was as bustling then as it is now. However, in the narrow alleyways of Kabukicho, hidden from the typical tourist's gaze, lurks a more intimate atmosphere. The catalyst for the unfolding events was the presence of love hotels, or as they are sometimes referred to, motels, lining the streets. On March 20th in Kabukicho, a couple checked into the A motel. This was such a common occurrence that the staff paid them little mind. However, after some time, only the man from the pair emerged from the motel, leaving the woman behind. Despite the checkout time having long passed, the woman remained absent. A motel worker, deciding it was time to investigate, called the room, but there was no answer. Ultimately, he ventured to the room himself and was met with a gruesome crime scene. The woman's body lay there, strangled with a rope. Fortunately, a business card left in the room aided in identifying the victim. She was found to be 33 years old, working as a hostess in one of Kabukicho's establishments. However, since hostesses often use fictitious names, it was impossible to confirm this information with certainty. It later emerged that she was actually 45 years old and had lost her husband and child in an accident, after which she wandered the country until she began working in a cabaret in Kabukicho. The pressing question remained about the identity of the man she checked in with. It was unclear whether he was an acquaintance or a client visiting her. Witnesses who worked at the establishment merely noted that the man appeared to be a young office worker, offering no further clues about his identity. This case remained stagnant for a long time, with no progress made. However, on April 25th, about a month after the first murder, another woman was found dead in a nearby motel. This time, the victim was a young woman, approximately in her 20s, who had been strangled with stockings. Motel employees confirmed that she had checked in with a man resembling an office worker around 9 in the morning. However, this man left the motel alone without paying for the room. It's possible the motel had a post-payment system in place at the time. Nevertheless, a motel worker, noticing the man's unusual behavior, decided to check the room and discovered the woman's lifeless body. Upon examining the room, the police found that all items present belonged to the deceased. These included earrings, sandals, cigarettes, and a lighter, but none bore any traces that could point to the perpetrator's identity. Moreover, the victim's identity could not be established, even with some of her personal belongings present. It is likely the perpetrator took her identification to hinder her identification. The Shinjuku police decided to create a composite sketch and disseminated it nationwide, but no information about the deceased came forward. Even 40 years after the crime, the victim's identity remains unknown. There were speculations that she might have been a foreigner, but nothing concrete has been determined. And so the story continues. A month after the incident at Motel B on June 14, 1981, at 6:30 in the morning, a similar situation occurred again in Kabukicho. This time, a couple checked into Motel C. Approximately half an hour later, a little after 7 in the morning, the man left the room, leaving the woman inside. As in the previous cases, the woman did not appear after the checkout time. When an employee came to inspect the room, he found the woman, strangled with stockings, lying unconscious. However, fortunately, she still showed faint signs of life. The woman was immediately rushed to the hospital, but despite all efforts, she soon passed away. Despite the tragic outcome, this time the identity of the victim was successfully established. She was a 17-year-old girl named A, residing in the city of Kawaguchi, Saitama Prefecture. A library card bearing her name was discovered in the motel room, which allowed for a swift identification. A grew up in a completely ordinary family. Her parents were office workers. However, after entering high school, she started hanging out with the wrong crowd and was eventually expelled. At the time of her death, the girl was going through a tough period in her life. She had one major dream: to become an actress. Shortly before the tragedy, she excitedly told her boyfriend that she had met someone from the theater world. This meeting filled her with great excitement and anticipation. The police considered this theatrical person as the main suspect and initiated an investigation, believing that this might finally be the thread leading to solving the case. However, things turned out to be more complicated than expected. The identity of the person she met could not be confirmed, and there wasn't even certainty that he was truly connected to the theater. The police found themselves at an impasse, unsure of how to locate him or where to start their search. An autopsy was later conducted on the deceased. Approximately 200 milliliters of coffee was found in the girl's stomach. This led to the assumption that she had been drinking coffee somewhere in one of the cafes in Kabukicho before arriving at the motel. She might have been there with the suspect. Based on the timeline of events, it was hypothesized that she first met the man, who claimed to be a theatrical figure, in one of the Kabukicho cafes, and then proceeded to the motel with him. It seemed simple enough to just find a cafe and ask the staff if they had seen them. However, the search yielded no significant results. The employees of Motel C also provided their testimonies. According to them, the man who had arrived with the deceased was about 160 centimeters tall and looked to be in his 30s, with the typical appearance of an office worker. A salaryman, an office employee, an ordinary person. Nothing remarkable. In truth, until the incident at Hotel C, the police didn't suspect that the previous incidents at Hotels A and B might be linked to a serial murder case. Yet identical incidents had occurred 3 times in a short span. Not only the police but also the public who were following these cases began to think more and more. This could be serial murder, couldn't it? But how does one come to terms with that realization if the case remains at a standstill? Unfortunately, there was no evidence to connect these cases, making it impossible to trace the criminal. Certainly, the similarity in the method of the crimes was apparent. However, looking deeper, the question remained: was one person committing these crimes, or were they dealing with an imitator? No one could say for sure. When the investigation began to hit a dead end once more, another incident with a similar pattern occurred. This time, it was an attempted murder. On June 25, 1981, at Hotel D, this time a man and a woman, both appearing to be in their early 30s, entered the hotel together. But around 11 p.m., the woman suddenly rushed to the reception, screaming for help. She claimed that the man had tried to strangle her. However, she managed to fight back, and eventually the man seemingly abandoned his attempt, grabbed cash from her wallet, and fled. So, who was this man? Having narrowly escaped danger, the woman began to share what she knew about her attacker. She admitted that they had met for the first time that night at an arcade. The man approached her when she was alone. Afterward, they went to the hotel together. Since it was a chance meeting, the victim didn't know the man's name or age. Fortunately, the victim managed to survive, but this incident bears a striking resemblance to previous occurrences. Shall we take a moment to collectively examine all these cases? Across these incidents, common traits of serial murder are evident. Firstly, when it comes to the suspect's appearance, witness testimonies are consistent. They all described him as a young office worker. However, to be honest, this description is quite vague and stereotypical. Essentially, everyone looked like young office workers. None of the witnesses could provide a more detailed description of the man. No mention of facial features or distinctive marks. This is truly peculiar. Even in the attempted murder case, where the victim survived, it was impossible to create a composite sketch. Consequently, the investigation proceeded without one. Moreover, it seems the perpetrator did not know the victims beforehand. Most likely, they crossed paths on the day of the incident. The first victim, in particular, a hostess from Kabukicho, fits this scenario. The second victim remains unidentified, leaving open the possibility that she was connected to sex work as well. On the other hand, the third and fourth victims were deliberately chosen on the same day. Thirdly, let's pay attention to the similar method of murder. All the victims died from strangulation. The second and third victims are particularly connected by the fact that they were strangled with nothing but nylon stockings. As the tension mounts, everyone leans towards the theory that a serial killer is at work here. However, there are also those who believe it's not certain that these are the actions of a single serial killer. Their arguments? Primarily the lack of any definitive regularity in the crimes. In reality, serial killers' actions usually follow a certain pattern. For instance, such killers might commit crimes on specific days of the week, under certain weather conditions, at specific intervals, or against victims with similar characteristics. But in this case, apart from the similar location, other details vary significantly. Furthermore, in one of the crimes, the perpetrator took great care to conceal the victim's identity by taking all items that could reveal it. As a result, the victim's identity remains unknown to this day. In another instance, the perpetrator left all the victim's personal belongings untouched, making no effort to hide her identity. Such a shift in behavior might indicate the existence of a copycat. Another crucial aspect of this case is the absence of any evidence at the crime scene pointing to the killer. Perhaps this was due to the lack of modern scientific technology at the time to identify the perpetrator, but it didn't even come to that, as there weren't even basic clues at the scene that could serve as a foundation for further investigation. Additionally, it's important to remember that in the 1980s, CCTV was a rarity. Above all, it was utterly unthinkable to install surveillance cameras in the area where these motels were located. The reason being, hotel guests were highly reluctant to have their faces recorded on motel CCTV. They expressed a strong unwillingness. This was despite the fact that the area was notorious for its high crime rate. The criminal might have taken advantage of this fact and, after committing the crimes, vanished without much difficulty, leaving no traces behind. The so-called Kabukicho motel serial murders case became a sensational event across Japan at that time. After all, 4 murders, and in such a secretive place, happened one after another. But what was even more shocking was that the police were unable to uncover anything about the perpetrator, and the investigation didn't make any progress. As a result, public interest in the case quickly waned. Without any new statements, the case eventually expired. In 1996, it was officially classified as an unsolved crime. If there was any outcome from this case, it was the expansion of CCTV installation throughout the Kabukicho area. Despite possible resistance from clients, the decision was made to install cameras to prevent similar crimes in the future. Nevertheless, friends, even after this, several serious crimes occurred in Kabukicho. Thus, the reputation of Kabukicho as a very dangerous place became firmly entrenched among the Japanese. A friend of mine who studied in Japan said that venturing into the hidden corners of Kabukicho alone, especially for women, was extremely risky. The Kabukicho motel serial murders case, which shook an entire era in Japan, remains unsolved after 42 years. It's intriguing to wonder where and how the real criminal lives. Is he able to enjoy life?